This is part 3 of a 4-part series, I guess, if you will, on common second act problems. Admittedly, today's is going to be a little more on the theoretical side, so it kind of requires an understanding that you know what a main tension is. I'm going to try to talk about it a little bit, but the problem we're talking about today is just main tension confusion. So if you're curious about main tension, I've done a video about that. I'll put a link up here so you can watch that and then maybe watch this one. So just make sure you know what a main tension is, because I'm not going to dive too deep into it. I'll give it a little summary, but that's about it. And if you're finding value, please be sure to like, subscribe if you haven't. I really do appreciate that. It also helps other people find the channel. And if you know, I don't like too much dilly-dally, so let's just jump in. The second act problem we are talking about today is called main tension confusion, and you do have to kind of understand what main tension is. I'm going to give a very brief summary, so here we go. At the end of the first act, and what propels the main character into the second act, is there is a question, sometimes a very specific one, sometimes it feels a little nebulous to the character. We, the storytellers, know, okay? So you have to know what it is. But that question is something like, will such and such do this, or will this other thing happen? And that's pretty much the model for a main tension question. And what happens is that question gets asked kind of at the beginning, and it sends the character on their path, and they start basically deciding, am I going to do this thing or am I not going to do this thing? I'm going to be able to do the thing, whatever the thing is. But it's this question that's kind of holding things together. And we get an answer to that at the end of the second act. That's what the culmination is called. So we start, we have a question, it's holding all the second act together, the main character is going through, and we get to the end and we get an answer. The main tension confusion is when the character gets a question, or sort of a question at the beginning, but then the question drastically changes in the middle, and it confuses the character. The audience is usually like, wait, what's going on? What just happened? And we start having these questions because we thought we were rooting for the character to do this one thing, and now all of a sudden we're rooting for the character to do something else. Well, now I've just wasted my time for the first half of the movie rooting for something that doesn't matter. And what happens is the audience just checks out. They're done. Now, the movie still might be entertaining and it might be enjoyable to watch, but people get done and they're like, what was that? Like, that was just kind of a train wreck. Admittedly, it's hard to have some examples for this. I'm going to mention one very specifically, but it's hard to have examples of this because often this problem gets solved in the script stage, so before production even begins. So to be candid, there's not a lot of production examples of this, but I've seen it over and over and over again in scripts, in the script stage. So before we get ready to shoot, we see the problem and we have to fix this problem. So as a screenwriter, as a storyteller, you want to make sure that you solve this problem. So let me talk about when it happens or how it happens, and then I'm going to give you a couple of solutions for how to solve it and how to resolve it and fix it, essentially. So the first two I'm going to kind of give you back to back, and then we'll talk about both of them. I'm going to use an example from a movie that maybe you have seen. The first one is when new information is presented that we, the audience, should have had sooner. So somebody presents information, one of the characters says something, we're like, why have you been holding out on us? You should have told us that sooner. What's the deal? The second one is similar to that, and that's when a new character is introduced, and we're like, weren't they introduced earlier? Like, that doesn't make sense. So the new character tends to happen with when it's a villain. So we have this one villain, and the main character is pursuing this one person that they think is the bad guy or bad girl, right? They're pursuing them, only to find out that, oh, it's not them, it's this other person. And now we change gears and it's like, oh, well, now we got to go after this other person, and then maybe this person becomes an ally, and we're like, I'm kind of confused. And sometimes you can do that very smoothly and it makes perfect sense, and other times it's just kind of a train wreck and we're confused. The information is usually the one that creates the problem, because we've been told so much like avoid exposition, wait for as long as possible on the exposition. So people start waiting as long as possible for the exposition, and then they drop an information bomb somewhere in the middle of the story, and we're like, why didn't you tell us that earlier? And it starts to get really confusing. And then we as the audience start feeling like we've been lied to or that we are being cheated. And that's what we don't like. A movie that you may have seen where kind of both of these things happen simultaneously is the movie Hancock. Hancock is, Will Smith is a superhero and Jason Bateman is in it, Charlize Theron's in it. It's just a great, fun movie and it's totally entertaining. But halfway through the movie, it's almost literally halfway through the movie, some information happens. There's a character that's kind of been more of a subplot character and is suddenly maybe the main character, and we're just kind of get confused because all of a sudden this one character does something and it throws everything out of whack. What we thought we were rooting for, what we were hoping was going to happen, that is not what the story is at all. We were thinking, oh, it's about Hancock and will he kind of be redeemed and all of this. And then all of a sudden it's about a relationship and other things that are going on. And there's lots of history and we get some information and it seems like there's some new characters. It's not really a new character, but it's a new character that's got super abilities. And we're going, wait, why didn't you tell us this sooner? We could have been enjoying this movie. And actually, when you look at the movie structurally, the first half can be a really great movie on its own if you just follow it to its natural conclusion. The second half of the movie could have been a really great movie on its own, but when they put two together, it was like they took the first half of one movie and the second half of another movie and mashed them together, and we're kind of like, I don't get what's going on. So it does start to pose a problem when you introduce new characters or new information or some variant of that, because the audience just gets confused. Another reason main tension confusion happens is because the writer or the storyteller is trying to surprise the audience. I'm like trying to pull one over, trying to prove the audience like, hey, as a storyteller, I'm really clever. And so we hold out information. We're like, haha, now I'm going to give you this one. It's like, okay, but if you had just told me sooner, it would have been fine. And we hold out information and then dump it and it spins things in a different way, and that's not usually the right solution. The other reason main tension confusion happens is one of the characteristics of a main tension is it has to be measurable. We have to know if the person gets it or not. So, will so-and-so win the race or not? Will they win the gold medal? Will they get the promotion? Will they get the job? Will they get the date? Will they get married? And those are measurable things. Things that are not measurable. Will she be successful? Will he be a star? How do you measure that? I mean, I don't know. What is the measure of success? Measure of success for me may be different than it is for you, just like it is for a character. It means that it's nebulous. It's too hard to pin. How will we know if the person got it? So, will he find out that he is loved by other people? How do you know that? Do 10 people have to come up and tell you, I love you? For that, I don't understand. So, if it's too nebulous, main tension confusion tends to happen. So, those are the reasons why it happens. So, how do we solve it? Well, the first way to solve it is that new character, the new information that gets dropped on us sometime later in the story. Don't do that. Move it to the first act. Move it earlier. If we're supposed to end up rooting for something to happen, then let us know that early on. The second act should be about us as audience knowing, hey, here's what I'm rooting for. Here's what I'm hoping happens. Here's what I'm afraid is going to happen. And the main tension helps us figure that out. Now, audiences aren't going to say ooh, the main tension of a movie was, that's not how we're thinking, but we are thinking what am I supposed to root for? How am I supposed to root for this person? What do I care about? Do I want them to win? Do I want them to lose? What am I wanting for them? That's essentially what the main tension is doing. So if you've got this information or a new character or something like that, move it earlier in the story. You might think, well, but then I don't have enough going on. Well, okay, fix your story. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. Just fix the story. So you need to take that information and move it sooner. Otherwise, the audience is going to be confused. Okay, the second way to solve this is make sure your main tension is measurable. So if you have a nebulous main tension, if it's just kind of like, I don't really know, it's like to be successful, to be a star, to, to be loved, or to not be lonely, something like that. It's too nebulous. We need something to measure. We need something to know they get it or they don't. So make sure your main tension is measurable. The third solution is to know what the answer to your main tension is. So some people have a very measurable main tension, but they're not really sure. I don't know if they get it or not. I guess maybe they do. Like, no, not good enough. They get it or they don't. There's no in between. Okay, you get it or you don't get it. And that's how you have to write and structure your story. You have to set it up to where the main character, whatever they're pursuing, they're going to get it or they're not going to get it. And you got to know what that answer is before you start writing. And if you don't know what it is, things are going to get all messed up in the second act, and people that read your story will be like, I'm kind of confused. What's going on? It's like, oh, well, it's this and this. Oh, well, I'm not sure how to feel about that, they're saying. And the reason they don't know how to feel about it is because they don't know what they're rooting for. And if they don't know whether the character got it or not, they don't even know, well, should I be happy or sad at the end of the movie? I don't know. Did they get what they wanted? So it has to be clear. One more little thing to think about, because you might be saying, well, but I kind of want to hold out this surprise, or I kind of want to introduce this character a little later, or I want things to feel a little nebulous. The problem is you're still going to end up confusing the audience, and that's what you don't want. Confusion, for the most part, is generally a bad thing. Sometimes it's okay, but for the most part, you want to avoid confusion. And you might be hesitant to move those things and make them happen sooner, right? I might be like, I don't know if I want to move the information sooner. I don't know about that. But what it does is it actually helps raise the stakes of the story. It makes your story more interesting, because now it's harder. It's not just that we have to get to this bad guy, we've got to get to this other bad guy. But to get to this other bad guy, we've got to get to this one. So if that's set up at the beginning where we know, like, okay, we've got to get to this person, but we have to go through this one, and you set that up at the beginning, now we know what we're rooting for, because now we are rooting that they get here because we know that's going to lead them here. And that's better. That's fine. And it makes it harder, and it raises the stakes. So let us as audience know what the stakes are right off the bat. Now we know what to root for, and that helps to eliminate this second act confusion where it's the main tension is causing the problem. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If it has and you found value, please like, subscribe if you haven't, hit the bell, all that fun stuff. I do appreciate it. Leave some comments if you're having troubles, like, hey, I'm having this, or here's how I solved it. Like, feel free to do that. Ask questions, all that stuff. Really do appreciate it. And if it's questions and things, I'll try to answer those or answer them in a future video. Again, this is part 3 of a 4-part series on second act problems. We're going to deal with the last one in the next video. And for those of you writing a story and telling a story, when you do, make sure you tell a story that matters. See you later.